Invited guests, please welcome this evening's moderator, Mara Reinstein.
Hey, everybody. My name is Mara Reinstein from the Television Academy. Thanks for coming. Thanks for staying. Hope you loved it. Please welcome showrunner, creator Joe Murtagh and star and executive producer Ruth Wilson. Okay, let's just get the crutch elephant out of the room.
Yes.
Ruth, you are okay? Do you want to explain in 60 seconds?
Yes, I ran the London Marathon 10 days ago, and I slightly injured my ankle and calf, so I'm needing this for a few weeks. That's what happened.
You're leaving out the best part, that you did finish it.
I did finish it. I finished it, but I had to walk the last 7 kilometers. It was it was amazing, but it wasn't quite what I expected. I don't think I'll be doing it again. Anyway.
All right.
More marathons.
Yes. Well, congratulations on finishing, and congratulations on this great series to you and to Joe.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. Well, listen, this is a fictional story, but as you note, as we just saw, it is based in reality that these laundries really did exist in Ireland for hundreds of years. The last one did not close until 96. As you point out, Joe, Macarena was on the charts. Doesn't seem like that long ago. What was the motivation for using this as the backdrop for your series?
You've kind of alluded to it really already. It's just that how for me it was the scale of horror. When you read into these things, how long these things were around, how relatively recently they ended, versus how few people know about this outside of Ireland. There's this just ginormous disparity between what happened and to the thousands upon thousands of people it happened to, versus just people don't know about this, and it all happened so recently. So we still have survivors who are Lorna's age and obviously older, because it's gone on for so long that really the whole series came about just to address that disparity. I wanted to write about this subject matter anyway. I wanted to excavate this bit of history, but it was more so. It was more that disparity that interested me. It was more that I just wanted to get the story out there in any kind of way, shape, form I could, because I didn't know. So my parents are Irish, their parents are Irish, their parents, and I didn't learn about. I didn't even know these existed. I didn't even know what these laundries were until I was 21 years old, because I watched a film called The Magdalene Sisters,
right,
which is a beautiful film. But I kind of went on to learn just how significant it was that it takes films and TV shows and it takes art to learn about this subject matter, because it is so swept under the rug, and because it's just not, people don't know about it, and it's being suppressed, and it's just that.
Ruth, did you know anything about the laundries?
A bit similarly to Joe, I'd seen Philomena, which I'm sure many of you have seen as well, and the Magdalene Laundries, or the Magdalene Sisters, sorry, by Peter Mullen. There was a little bit in the news, because things drip feed out into the news in the UK. So there was some stuff that happened that was pretty devastating, awful news stories about finding sort of remains of dead babies in the septic tank of one of these institutions. So you read about things like that, but it's not kind of general knowledge. There's no deep dives on it. So I know a bit, but not that much. And so doing the research for this and signing on to this show, it was like, wow, this is something that needs to get out there. It's a story that more people need to know about. And the way that Joe was framing it was through a sort of lens that could be more commercial, through genre, through horror, psychological horror, through also the crime thriller element to it, which meant that we could try and get it to a wider audience.
What really surprised you the most in your research for both of you, specifically?
I mean, for me, it was, first of all, it was just how relatively recently it all ended. 1996 was the last Magdalene Laundry. 1998 was the last mother and baby home. Similar sort of institution. I guess there wasn't one particular thing. It was just the scale of it. It was just the more we read about it, and we spoke to some survivors too. Just the horror of it. Just the scale of the horror of their stories.
Were there consequences for the people running these
No.
asylums? No. How is that possible?
None. There was a state apology in 2013. I know that meant a lot to a lot of people because the state was complicit in all of this for allowing these. They were state funded. But in terms of if we're talking about the actual perpetrators, the nuns running these places, the Catholic Church in general, no, none. And to date, as far as I'm aware, the church has not paid a penny in compensation to survivors.
I know, Ruth. It's so hard to believe. I know.
Wow. These women, they're still, like Joe was saying, these women, the survivors of these places and the children of these places too, are still out there fighting for their truth, fighting to be heard, fighting to have, get justice for what happened. It's such a sort of point and period of shame that it's really hard for people to actually process and then reconcile and then do the right thing. That takes a long, long time. So, doing this show felt a bit like a risk because we were going to be putting this out there and we were going to get some people that weren't going to be happy about having this out there because it's still very recent history and very hurtful and painful, So I think doing the show, it was such a huge responsibility to take it on, and I think all of us felt in the process of it, writing it, putting on, editing it, getting it out there, we felt huge responsibility and sensitivity towards those women and those stories.
Ruth, as an actress, how do you put yourself in that sort of nightmarish sleepwalking state that we see a lot in that first episode?
Probably lack of sleep, mainly. It sort of helps. I mean, I'm doing a big service to the director as well because I think, and the DP, it's like you create a relationship with that person who's filming you. And I think what was interesting was about getting inside the subjective experience of Lorna and allowing the audience to come into her feelings. That means the camera's up close. It means you have this direct relationship with that camera and they're seeing everything. And so I think working alongside Harry and Sai, who DP'd it, we were like, how do we get inside her head and make that visceral for the audience? So I'm letting them write in, but you're kind of creating relationship with those people at the same time. I mean, it's also Joe's writing. Like we were like, okay, you want to get inside her. There's something interesting about her. I always thought she was a character that obviously was put inside this place. These women that went inside these places, they were often the best women. They were had opinions. They stood out. They weren't just going in there because they were pregnant. They often went in there because they were cool women that stood out, and they weren't afraid to. They were put in these places. So I wanted Lorna to be that. And Joe had written her with humour. Joe had written her with some quirk. So I wanted to lean into that humour, lean into the weirdness of this woman. It wasn't weird, she was wonderful, but she was made to feel weird. She was made to feel wrong. And so it's like, how do you kind of bring that quirk out? So that was really important for me, that you see that side to her, the potential of who this woman was as a girl that's been sort of squashed. But as the show goes on, you start to see her come into her own again as she gains agency. But yeah, it was amazing. I loved this. I jumped at the part because of the surprising nature of the character. And Joe had written a very surprising woman. I never knew what she was going to do next. I didn't expect her to be putting a woman in the wall by the end of the episode. And I was like, what the fuck is she going to do next? And I loved it. It made me very excited because I didn't quite understand her. And so I felt, okay, this is going to be fun to play. And the humour of it is really vital against the tragedy and the trauma.
Yeah, I agree. It's very subtle humor, Joe, but it's effective throughout the series. Is there that opening shot too, of her and the road with the cows? Like, is there extra symbolism that we should be reading into that?
I just thought cows were funny. I just thought it was.
They took ages to come up to me.
I was expecting this deep answer of what the cows meant. You're just because.
No, sorry. Yeah. For me, it was just I wanted to just establish just Lorna just from the get-go visually, and it had to be just asleep in a road with cows all around her. That's as far as my explanation goes, really.
Well, it did leave a memorable impression, that is for sure. And So we have that sort of gothic mystery plus the history plus Daryl's character's investigation. So there's a lot of different kinds of genres going on just in this first episode. How do you strike the balance for this and for the episodes to come?
I mean, I definitely, Ruth touched on it earlier. I wanted genre was my way into this.
Yeah.
Again, just because of how unknown the subject matter is, and I wanted to sort of trick you all into just sitting down to watch a really weird murder mystery and then accidentally learn all about the Magdalene Laundries. So that sort of is my sort of umbrella answer for why there are so many different tones and genres in there. But I guess, I think the Irishness of it has a lot to do with it. I think that, that's the sort of the staple of it, because there's lots of references for this. There's Coen Brothers and there's Hitchcock, and Edgar Allan Poe was a huge part of this. And you'll see in later episodes, I quite explicitly, I just steal moments from Edgar Allan Poe stories, if I'm honest with you, and shoehorn them in there. And I think it works. But but I think I think there's an inherent Irishness to it, which was important to me because even though the town is fictional, it's a very Irish town. These are very Irish characters, and I think humor just naturally comes with that, and I think it's just more honest. I think that whenever when I spoke to survivors, they were really funny, and they were telling me really funny stuff. They were obviously telling me horrific stories from the laundries, and then every now and then they would just say something that just makes you laugh, or they would have a very Irish way of just putting a spin on a devastating situation that I would never be able to come out of in one piece. But they had this quirk to it that I think is very it's very Irish and it's very admirable. So it's just, I think that sort of...
I guess, do you have to have a sense of humor if you've gone through something like that?
I think it probably helps.
Yeah.
I think it probably helps, yeah.
Are any of the real life survivors in any of the episodes?
No.
Right.
No, it was very important to protect them and their identities. And I like, just, it sounds so stupid, but I'm not being glib, but the act of them just getting on a Zoom call with me was genuinely courageous, because these places are just steeped in this sense of shame, of completely love. They were made to feel completely ashamed of who they were as people and what they had apparently done. And so just I was in absolute awe and admiration of these women just to get on a Zoom with me and talk candidly about this, and they were happy that we were making the series, which I did not expect at all. But there was no pushback whatsoever from any of them. They were like, "Yeah, cool, get it out there, tell people what fucking happened in these places." So that was amazing.
And Ruth, I mean, as like one of the faces of the series, have you been hearing from more people since the series premiered last year overseas, here on Paramount Plus earlier this year? What kind of feedback have you been getting?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of people that have stories. My aunt or a friend of my friends, or, my sister went through that, or, there's loads of people were coming out with those stories and having experience. I mean, these places didn't just exist in Ireland. It's important to say that they also existed in Liverpool, Manchester. It wasn't just the Catholic Church; the Protestant Church did it as well. So there were these places all over, and probably in America too. And also the babies were sold to American families. So there's a huge connection with the US. So it affected thousands of people. And those stories were starting to surface. And certainly when it went out in the UK, there was every paper and newspaper did a deep dive on these institutions and the stories of these people that had gone through it. It was exactly what we wanted to happen. We wanted that conversation to happen, and we wanted those women, their experience to be validated, and just another step to being listened to and heard, which was what happened.
I mean, Ruth, you take a lot of risks in your roles. We won't go through your entire biography, but there's a lot of challenges. There's a lot of risks. Is that something that you enjoy doing as an actress?
Yeah, I think it's the only way to work.
I mean, you don't want to do a light comedy.
No, but that would also feel like a risk to me, probably.
Right.
I don't know. I think we have a responsibility, and if you're in a position where you can put a story on a platform, you can get it out there, then that is your responsibility to do so. I do plenty of sort of humorous work in my theatre productions as well, and all sorts. But it's like I sort of feel you do have a responsibility to give back, or to reflect, or to challenge, and that's the joy and the privilege of the position I'm in.
Is
yes.
Is this the first series that you've had an EP credit on?
No, I did Mrs. Wilson as well, which was
right,
my
of course.
family story.
Yeah.
And I did a film called True Things, which Harry Whitliff, who directed the 4 episodes of this, she directed 2. Yes, I've done 3 projects that I've EP'd.
What do you like about being on both sides like that?
I love collaboration. So I mean, that's the main reason I got into this job in the first place, was because you're working with a team of people to create something magical. And so as an actor, you sometimes just feel you only have one role, and that's you come in and do your thing and leave. Mm-hmm. But working with Joe from the outset and working on character with a writer is really fun to do, working on the journey of the whole thing. I mean, in this, we were really involved in the edit too, so that was really fun to sort of see how it all formed.
Right.
And so to be honest, it's about collaboration. I love being involved in the whole process and working with all those amazingly creative people that are creating something. I love being part of that.
Yes. Joe, anything to add about working with Ruth?
No, I would just echo that. Really, no, I just completely echoed that. It was, when Ruth came on board, we had the pilot and the sort of the skeleton of the rest of the series. So what was a joy then was to be able to write the rest of the series with Ruth there as EP and also as Lorna to be able to give instant feedback on everything. So. No, it was just absolutely incredible working with Ruth on this, and it was great having so many other EP. Harry Whitliff directed; she was also EP on this, and so it was just having your creative team in place. Your sort of your main HODs in place so early on in the process, all contributing to the writing process as you're going on is invaluable.
And I mean, we haven't even mentioned the other co-stars in the series. They're wonderful. Not here by proxy. Are we going to see more interaction between Lorna and Daryl's character going forward? Let's assume you guys haven't seen the other episodes.
You must watch the rest because it goes really weird and brilliant. Yes, you will see they're the sort of missing piece of each other in some ways. I mean, not entirely, but it's not as cliched as I might have just suggested. But you will see their characters come together. They're already interested at this stage, and then they're drawn to each other for some reason, and you will find out why.
You really need, it's not just enough to have Lorna's story, right? You need Daryl's story also.
Yeah, absolutely, because, Daryl's character, Colman, he came out of, the research began with the women themselves, but then we started looking at, well, who are the children, and what are they doing now, and where are they? And we really needed someone to reflect that portion of the story. So yeah, absolutely. I
mean, all of the characters, if you see, you realise that when you sort of study what happened in Ireland, you realise the whole community were involved. It wasn't just individuals. Everyone was complicit in these things existing. So every character in the piece, you see they all have a story linked to this place. Massey, the other copper. You start to see that there's they all had you'll start to see how they have a relationship to those institutions as well, and whether they were complicit or not.
And why is it that so many people in the town are basically gaslighting her? Why is that?
The church was so powerful. I mean, it's when you have priests who are, when God is so powerful that, whatever he says, I don't know, people can manipulate that, can't they? Humans are able to manipulate that idea and use it to control society. So I don't know, I sort of think it was a really interesting, the church was in the schools, it was in everyday life. Mm-hmm. They had power at every point, so everyone felt controlled or sort of manipulated. I don't know, they probably didn't even feel they were manipulated, but they were certainly part of the system.
Yeah, the church was the highest authority in Ireland for decades.
Right, of course.
Decades and decades. And you can see reflections of that when you look at Boston, where instantly a lot of children ended up. It was just this all powerful entity that just governed. So when you're looking at people like characters like Massey, I think he has a really interesting arc over the series. Even just the act of turning a blind eye is complicit, but you also you learn to understand why if you can see the context of the place. And Ireland being a very poor country as well, I think they placed a lot of emphasis on moral wealth. If the church is the highest power and the priest, you trusted the priest, you trusted the local priest to tell you to do the right thing. So it's a very perverse and very paradoxical relationship.
And we were talking before that you did film this in Ireland. What is this, does that add to the authenticity of it that you were there?
I mean, I think we just had to be there,
Yeah.
and we filmed most of it up north where they have just fantastic crews. It just had to be in the country.
Right.
It had to be there, and also just for a practical reason, it had to be there. Because it had to look like Ireland, and we had to have Irish people in it. So there was.
I was going to say,
that too.
You must have been quite what was the local reaction? I guess they're used to it.
They were great. They loved it. Yeah. I mean, but genuinely, like going back to my conversation with the survivors, that is one of the things that really surprised me was the lack of pushback we had. I was expecting a hell of a lot of pushback on this, and obviously there was some here and there.
You mean pushback from like the locals?
From locals, or from kind of all corners. I was expecting pushback on me with my awful English accent telling this story, but
right.
But no, there wasn't. It was like people are. The regular people are just wanting this story out there, and it's actually the people who are up there who have a lot to lose are the people who don't want this story out there. But for the majority, people want this story told, and we're very encouraging of doing so. And Ruth said it earlier, but I remember being on set, and the amount of times a crew member would come up to me, the boom op would come up and be like, yeah, my auntie was blah, 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 or, oh yeah, my mum had a friend at school who sort of disappeared, but like it just touched that many lives.
Yeah.
It was, everyone had a story of like 2 or 3 degrees of separation from these things.
I mean, right, like you mentioned, the 90s weren't that long ago. So
No.
I know. Wow. All right, a couple of things before we go, a couple of loose ends. Number one, Sinead O'Connor. Can you just explain the backstory of how we hear her music at the closing credits?
Yes, I don't want to give too much away for those who haven't seen the ending, but we have a piece of music that Sinead O'Connor gave to the show, which is about her own experience. She was in the Magdalene Laundry. I believe a nun bought her very first guitar. She has quite an amazing story. If you read into about her experiences in the laundry, but yeah, she herself was in the laundry. She wrote a song about it, and we now have that in the show.
Was that something that was before she passed? Did she sign off on it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was kind of a moment of serendipity, really, because our composer David Holmes, who did that amazing soundtrack in there, produced her last album, and so that connection was already in place for us, and he went and spoke to her, and after she passed, he spoke to the family, and she was very happy for this to be in our show.
Wow, I don't think a lot of people realize, even when her obituary was written, that and you see even like through her what the effects are. It's so interesting and sad in a lot of ways.
Yeah, at the time when she was, people were ridiculing her or calling her mad. It's only now that everyone's like, okay, she went through something horrific and traumatic, and that wasn't her fault.
Right.
So the same for Lorna. There was elements of this woman's been told she's mad. She's been gaslit her whole life, been told that it was her fault, or those experiences didn't really happen, the ones that she's saying she thought she remembered happening. And the idea that she had a child, she gave birth for 30 seconds, and she had that child in her mind's eye for 30 seconds and then never saw her child again. I mean, how can you even know what your identity is, your past? You don't even know if that really happened. It must be so discombobulating and really hard to form any form of identity from that. So someone like Sinead, it was like she was a real inspiration for me as well.
Yeah.
In the process of bringing Lorna to life.
Right. I mean, like I said, you've talked to many survivors. Someone who's really well known in the public eye, it sheds a new light on it for sure. In a spoiler-free zone, we're not going to give away how this ends, who the woman in the wall is, what happened. But are you thinking that this could lead to another story, Joe? I'm trying to be vague on purpose.
And I need to be vague now, don't I? For me, this particular story emotionally is close-ended. I wanted to tell it in these 6 parts.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, when I started out writing this, you start out writing a TV show and you think, Jesus Christ, 6 hours. That's a lot. That's a lot of stuff to write. But no, it's like it wasn't nearly enough to cover the ground, it turns out. When you get into the research and you start telling all of these people's stories, it actually is not nearly enough time. So still trying to be vague, but I guess what I would say is there are we try to fit a lot of real stories into this. In some ways we had to combine a lot of elements here into single characters or scenes, but there is so much left to be excavated with this, so much. So you could make 15 seasons out of this if you wanted to. My hope is that people go off and start making other shows about this in a completely different light, or film. There's like a Cillian Murphy film coming out this year, all the small things. No, that's Blink-182. What's it called?
It's something like that. It's the Claire Keegan novel.
Book, yeah.
Small Things Like These.
Small
maybe.
Things Like These. There you go. Yeah. So sorry.
Yeah.
My hope is just that people just pay attention to a bit more. That they go off and make shows of their own. I mean, the real hope is that people don't have to make a TV show about this anymore in order to get people to sort of sit up and learn about this, or other people to sit up and do the right thing about this. My hope is that this actually just sheds a spotlight on this where there was none before, and where there is a spotlight on this already in Ireland, that people will be more empowered to, there's a brilliant charity called Justice for Magdalene's Research. They were fantastic in the making of this. Hopefully our show and maybe more shows or films to come about this will enable them to do their job better, make their lives a bit easier, make survivors' lives a bit easier, just by lots of people just fucking knowing about this.
Absolutely.
That's the real hope with this.
And then last question that I would like both of you to answer is that, again, not getting into details about how this ends, but I mean, what essentially is The Woman in the Wall about? Is it like how to cope with trauma when no one is really on your side? Like, what do you want us to get out of watching this series, aside from what happened in Ireland?
Sure. It's we're gonna have completely different answers for this. Well, that I think that's kind of the joy of it for me, because I think you could ask everyone in the audience that question by the end of the series, and they'll all have a different answer, because it's that broad in scale. For me, yeah, primary thing was just getting this story out there. God, it's a good question. I don't have a good answer for it, to be honest with you.
You just told me you've been doing press all year for this.
I know, sorry. I guess, for me, it was all about Lorna from the beginning, really, and it was just about vindicating her. Again, it's hard to talk about without spoilers, but
right.
I wanted to, or not, vindicating her by the end of it. It was all about motherhood and what it means to be a mother in that very strange context in a modern day Ireland. I was always interested in that paradox and trying to put a modern audience in the, that's why it had to be contemporary rather than doing a period piece in the Laundries in the 60s or 70s or 80s or 90s. I wanted to look at what this very medieval thing looks like in a very modern context. So just having people put themselves in their shoes, in these women's shoes, and realize that, for all the the contemporary single mothers out there, if they were just in the wrong place at the wrong time, they could have ended up in one of these institutions.
Right.
That's quite a scary thought. So I was more interested in that rather than any one particular theme. I think there's a lot of themes to dig into with this.
Sure. Ruth, you get the last word.
I was thinking, I wonder what drew me initially was the idea. I thought Joe was landing on the idea of how trauma manifests and can manifest. And I thought the way the show deals with that is really fascinating, and how actually this woman, when someone is trapped and made to feel like they're mad and their life, everyone is telling them that what they did is wrong, she is someone that has to sort of survive that trauma and get over that trauma and fight for her own truth. And in the bead of truth that she has, that bead of belief that she is not wrong, and that she has to fight that throughout, including her own sense of sanity. I mean, what was so great is that Jo sets up this woman who is told by everyone else she's mad. Then she has sleepwalking. She suffers in trauma with sleepwalking. She's scared of sleeping. She stays awake, becomes more insane. So it's like actually her line of reality and non-reality and what trauma can do and what also society can do to make you feel like you're wrong. You're wronged.
Right.
I don't know. I felt there was something really, that's not very clear, but I thought there was something sort of quite fascinating in that. And she's such an extraordinary woman, the character of Lorna, because she does have that mother instinct and that sort of bead of truth that she is determined to fight and gain justice.
Sure. And by the way, it is absolutely clear watching that episode for sure, and definitely in the episodes to come. Thank you guys so much. Congratulations. Woman of the Wall is streaming on Paramount Plus. Please join us outside of the reception. Thank you.